Morning. Okay. Okay. You ready to start? Good morning, everybody. I had said that we were going to start a new topic, and the topic is hakpada. We had mentioned it in Elul when we spoke about dropping the measuring stick. We said we're going to deal with internalized anger and different ways to resolve internalized anger. So first of all, the word in the Torah that we use for this is hakpada. It's interesting, hakpada comes from the shorish of kuf pei daled. We say that people are makbid. They're makbid on halacha. They're makbid on matching their outfits. That's the way it's used, like kind of colloquially. And it also comes from the same shorish as the animal porcupine. In modern Hebrew, is kipod. A kipod means a prickly. What's a porcupine? It has like little pricks. So the person with internalized anger is like a prickly person, meaning inside they have all kinds of like, they're barbing everybody, but inside their head. So we don't really talk about hakpada so much. Many of you probably never even heard about it as a midah. And we talk a lot about anger, kas. So hakpada is from the anger family, but it's internalized anger. Instead of getting angry at you and yelling at you, I get angry, I smile at you as if nothing's wrong, and inside I feel like I want to do I don't know what. So this is actually a very dangerous midah, even though it's not spoken about so much. And Rabbi Yisrael Salan said that most midot have positive uses. Where is it good to have a little gaiva? Where is it good to have a little something? He says this midah, hakpada, there's no good in it. It's never good to have internalized anger. And he says that it's like you have to treat it like chametz on Pesach, to get rid of it completely, every little bit of it. So the question is why? Why this intense response to this midah? So we're going to see that hakpada, at some point in this year we're going to get to anger. And I'm not advocating anger right now at all. But if we compare hakpada, internalized anger, to anger, there's a few ways that it's worse. I'm explaining to you why. There's something in communication called an intent-impact discrepancy. What does that mean? Intent-impact discrepancy means that if I said something and I had a certain intention, but the impact that I had on you was something different, so there's a discrepancy, there's a gap there. Meaning I said something about your outfit, I meant to compliment you, you took it as an insult, and there's a gap between what I meant and the way you understood me. Now, when people get angry, if the person on the other side said, how could you say that to me? Why'd you say that about my outfit? So then I, the initiator, can say, oh, that's not what I meant. I really meant that I liked your outfit. And I just stopped, I solved the problem. I filled up the gap. But if you on the other end heard me say something, you were offended or angry at me, but you just smiled and you didn't say anything, I, the offender, never know that I bothered you. So we can't fix the gap. Meaning you walk away saying, she is so obnoxious. Why'd you say that to me? That's so mean. And I walk away saying, have a nice day, because I don't even realize that I hurt you. And this is the problem with hakpada. When you keep things in, people don't understand that they did anything wrong. Now again, if I keep it in because I really don't want to make a big deal about this and I'll be fine in a few minutes, that's not hakpada. Hakpada is I keep it in and all of my anger, instead of going out towards you, my anger is going in my heart. If I just like smiled at you because it's fine, in a second I'll be fine and I really am fine, that's not a bad midah, that's a good midah. But if I make the mistake and just put on the smile, but inside I'm burning at you, that's hakpada. Okay, so we just said that there's one problem with hakpada, which is that the intent-impact discrepancy is not bridged. Nobody ever knows that they're doing anything wrong. And you know what? It's like a very much of a Jewish girl's midah, this idea to like smile and pretend that nothing happened. You know, like, oh yeah, fine, of course, sure, I all my clothing all the time. And you can like me up, no problem, I'm not being woken up. I'm like, it's great, right? It's like this good girl thing that you should like pretend like nothing ever bothers you. In marriage, I find, because I deal sometimes with the couples later, there's this build-up of animosity, specifically usually on the side of the girl. Like the boy is stepping on her toes in a few different ways, but she keeps on smiling and saying, everything's fine, until she has like a major blow-up. And he has no idea. He's been doing things that have been offending her for months, but because she couldn't communicate about them, and she still was angry and she couldn't get past it, she has this built up anger. So when we really care about people, it's not a great thing to just kind of smile and say everything's great. We're going to have to learn what is the right thing. We're going to learn it soon. So that was the first problem, is intent impact discrepancy. The second problem is that any behavior that makes me feel holy when it's really, really not good for me is a dangerous midah. When people get angry and they yell and scream, they never feel good about themselves. Oh, I want to be better next time. I want to have more self-control. Why did I have that outburst? That was really... But when you walk away from it and say, oh yeah, everything's fine. And you say, I didn't say a thing. I just smiled. But you're walking away and you're burning up inside your heart, and you feel very pure because I didn't say a thing. There's a problem with that, because it's not good for you, but it feels good. And that's the second problem with hakpada. The third problem with hakpada is the main reason why we want to deal with this midah. And listen to this, girls. Kas, anger, is a bad thing. But there's no specific Isser Doraisa that's connected to it. Hakpada, internalized anger, has a connection to a certain Avera, which is an Avera from the Torah. Yes? Exactly. Vayikra Yotes, Lotisna et achicha bilvavecha. You are not allowed to hate your brother in your heart. Now you're going to say to me, hate? I don't hate her, I'm just upset at her that she did that to me. And what's my answer to you?
What's the message?
Lotisna et achicha bilvavecha. Do not hate your brother in your heart. That's an Isser Doraisa, Vayikra Yotes. Now you're going to say to me, yes? Okay, that's exactly what I want to say right now. Who's calling it hate? I'm angry at her. I don't hate her. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin, yes?
You'll come to hate her if you bottle up your issues.
Excellent. And I'm going to give you a source for that right now. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin, Parak Vav, defines what a sona is. What is it? What's an enemy? And it says something very scary. Kol shelo diber ito gimel yamim mitoch eva. Anybody who you are avoiding for 3 days out of animosity, nikra sone, is somebody who you hate. Now that could happen because I've been offended by you a few times, or you said something really obnoxious, and now for 3 days I see you coming, I walk the other way. Your number comes up on my phone, I ignore it. Yes?
Is that necessarily hatred? Can't that be like, I'm hurt by you, I don't want to be hurt again?
Okay, so we have to be medayik the lashon of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Kol shelo diber ito gimel yamim, anybody who you're avoiding for 3 days, mitoch eva, out of animosity. Now, let's say what it isn't. It's not, I'm embarrassed by you. It's not, I'm avoiding you because I need to cool down and soon I'll be okay. So it's better for us to have some distance because then I'll feel better about you. And the litmus test here is, what is the distance doing? If the distance is perpetuating the negativity, then it's Ava. Then it's what the Mishnah is called Misone. Sometimes some people get upset and they need a little bit of space, but the purpose of the space is in order to feel good about you. So if I'm trying to rectify the relationship, to fix it, and that's why I'm avoiding you a little bit, that's not what the Mishnah is talking about. So it's also not talking about avoiding somebody because you forgot to return something and you're embarrassed to see her. It's just about Ava, animosity. So if I'm avoiding you because I can't stand to see you, bless you, that is called Ava, and that's a Sone. Now, by the way, Gimel Yamim, the different poskim halacha, we talk about this sugya as the halachic sugya, say it's 3 opportunities where you otherwise would have interacted with the person. Like, for example, if you call this person every Friday, and for 3 Fridays in a row you ignore them, that would be called Gimel Yamim, 3 days. 3 opportunities where I normally would interact with them that I'm going out of my way to avoid them because I'm so angry at them. Now, if we put this back into the hakpada framework, that could happen. Somebody offended me, hurt me, and I'm really upset at them, and I'm avoiding them because I just don't want to see their face. So, yes?
What if someone does something just unforgivable to you and you have to internalize it because you can't?
Okay. So what we are trying to do with this midah, because this midah happens, it happens. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a little offensive, depending on what your tolerance threshold is. Some people are makbid on people for pretty small things. And some people have some big things in their life where they really, really are hurt by something that somebody did. Like these sometimes are very, very big things. So what do we do? So what I'm trying to present you is as follows. Hakpada as a midah is something which we definitely want to get rid of. Rabbi Yisrael Salan says we should. We understand now why we should, especially if it could slip into an Aveiro Doraisa. What are our tools for getting rid of Hakapara? I'm going to tell you girls that I'd like to give you a toolbox of 5 tools. And, well, let's say them and then I'll tell you what I want to say about it. The first one is Vitor. Vav Vav Yud Taf Vav Resh, Vitor, means, like we spoke about in Elul, it means to rise above somebody's error, to forgive them. We spoke about dropping the measuring stick, if you remember, girls. Like, I don't have to measure the amount of pain they caused me. Okay, they said something insensitive. Maybe they were in a bad mood. I could be bigger than that. I can forget it. That's called an internal resolution. Meaning I'm smiling at you and saying it's okay, because really within a few minutes it will be okay. Because I'll do something in my head and I'll forgive you and I'll be okay. That is a very powerful tool. We spoke about this in Elul, that it's also a big source for Yom Hadin. Because when you do this to other people, Hashem forgives you for your Averos. So it's a very big source. But Vitor is not always appropriate. Why not? First of all, you want to say
Well,
something?
they did something really big, you can't just get over it, and
Yeah.
try and get over it.
Sometimes, as much as I'm sweating to try to forgive you and get over it, it's not really working. That's number one. Number two, what about constant offenders? Somebody who keeps doing the same thing again and again and again. Every time you do it, I'm going to have to work to forgive you, and then again, and then again, and then again. Yes?
Then you'll start seeing that it's not your problem, so maybe a solution would be that you have to distance yourself from that person, like as a last resort.
Okay, we have to look right. Sometimes, by the way, we don't have to be best friends with everybody. We can't be a soulmate, but sometimes you say this person and I don't have good chemistry. I'm not avoiding them out of animosity, but it's better for us to have a more superficial relationship. Not everybody has to be your closest friend, especially if they constantly hurt you, for sure. I often tell people that in certain relationships it's good to make a little distance if the person is constantly hurting you. Usually if the person has no insight to the fact that they're hurting you and doesn't want to know, those are not great close friends, but we'll talk about that. Okay, what's number 2? Yes?
What if an offender, kind of like class questions are a little different. What if an offender constantly hurts you, but it's small things, but that communication won't work in the case.
That the
You
what?
know that
The
it'll
what won't
only
work?
increase, that communicating with them
Yeah,
Doesn't say-
increase the negativity within the issue,
yeah.
and it won't solve anything. So would you distance that relationship?
Okay, so first we're going to deal with the 5 tools, and if none of the 5 work, then for sure you would think about distancing. Yeah. Okay, so the first one is Vitor. Vitor is the internalized resolution, okay? I am going to smile at you. I'm not going to let you know that I'm upset. And the reason is because within a few minutes I really won't be upset, or a few hours, because I'm working it through myself, and I'll be fine. So I'm just not turning this into an issue.
These are 5 steps for to
Resolving internalized anger. Okay. Number 2 is what we're going to call tohacha. Tohacha is rebuke, and we're going to learn what that really means deeply. But it's the externalized resolution, meaning we have to talk. And this is good for constant offenders, because if they're going to keep on doing the same behavior again and again and again, maybe they have to know they're doing something offensive. It's also good if I could get over it, but you're hurting a lot of other people. There are different reasons, or because you're somebody who I want to feel close to, and the thing that you're doing is really not allowing me to be close to you. We're going to see that tohacha, meaning externalized communication, is difficult, because many people are not good candidates for let's have a talk about this. We're going to learn very carefully how to do tohacha properly. It's one of the 5 tools. It's often not appropriate. If the person on the other end is not a good recipient for your little conversation, then this might not be the right tool. We are going to learn how to do it properly. How can I facilitate the best conversation possible that hopefully will get good results? But sometimes the other party is defensive or has very poor insight into themselves, and even if you masterfully create the conversation, they're still not going to accept what you're saying. So we're going to get to that. Number 3 is what I call, what Chazal call humor. But this is not humor, let's reframe this and see this as being humor is something very specific, which we're going to define when we get to it. But it's another tool for how to deal with difficult people. Hold on to it. You can write it down as humor. It's not the definition you think, and we'll get to it soon. Number 4 is emunah. And emunah is when I can reframe and say nobody can inflict pain on me unless Hashem allowed them to. So they might be punished for what they're doing, but the fact that they're in my life is really between me and Hashem. And I don't know if I ever said this to you, it's the reframe in one sense. We're going to go very deeply into this when we get to it. But the reframe in one sense, instead of saying with anger, why is he doing this to me? You capitalize the H and you say, why is he doing this to me? And it becomes more of a speculative, what does Hashem want from me in this situation? How does he want me to grow? Why did he put this person in my life? And it takes away some of the anger when I realize that this is really a situation that Hashem put in front of me for some reason. Yes?
To what extent does Hashem want you in that situation?
Okay, so when we get to Emunah, we're going to go into this very deeply to understand what does that even mean. Okay, it's a good question, and that's exactly what I want to answer. Number 5 is tefillah. I have to tell you girls, when I get to it, we'll say, this was one that I added late, because sometimes you try everything, and you cannot remove the negative feeling that you have. And if you think about it, we daven for Hashem to bring Mashiach, to heal the sick people, to change the world. We can't daven for him to remove an offense from my radar screen. Like, I don't want to obsess about this 100 times a day. Please Hashem, distract me, give me something else that will grab me, and help me get over it. I would like to say that if I ask you, I'm not going to ask you to talk about it, but if I asked you, what was something that was bothering you tremendously 5 years ago in a certain relationship? Many of you will tell me it's not bothering me today to the same extent. Sometimes people have a perpetual issue in their life that's always bothering them. But it could be a fight that you had with a friend, somebody you couldn't stand 5 years ago. What happened was, originally you were thinking about it 100 times a day, and then slowly but surely, 50 times a day, 20 times a day, and then you get to a point where you're like, oh, I barely think about that person, even though they did hurt me. So this is Hashem moving it off your radar screen. And you can daven for him to remove it quicker. Yes?
Does that mean that, like, because, like, I had a situation like that. I was, like, in 5th grade and I had a fight with this girl, but, like, she completely, like, destroyed my elementary. And, like, for so many years, I just want to call her and not even, like, start a fight with her, but ask her, like, why? Like, because I don't know, maybe I was, like, an annoying little, but I don't remember. Like, it could have been me, but, like, I always, like, every year when we learn about Elul and, like, forgiving and, like, calling and asking for, like, I want to always call her and ask, but, like, I do think about it once a day at least, but, like, I remember, like, that was, like, the main thing.
Your whole life, then.
But then now, like, it happened, like, 12 years ago, I don't know, so, like, I barely think about it now, but,
Yeah.
like, do I still, like, call her and ask her, or, like, what would be, like, the case of,
It
like...
depends if you've really forgiven her, or if you're able to reframe it, which we're going to talk about. I mean, I'll just say in one word, we're going to get to it when we get deeper. The way I think of a 5th grade girl is that they probably don't even really know why they're doing what they're doing. And this one thing that, I don't know if I said it here or not, I once heard this from Dr. David Pelkowitz, who's a big psychologist in New York. He says a principle about bullying. He says 4 words, so smart. Hurt people, hurt people. Usually somebody has something going on in their life, and if they're bullying you, it's because they're being bullied, something very painful going on in their life. And they might not even make the connection. But this girl could have been suffering from something going on in her home, and you were the unfortunate victim.
But what if it's, like even, like, till today, like, I know a ton of girls, like, you say 5th graders don't really know what they're doing. So I would see, like, a ton of girls from my elementary school, but, like, specifically her, she'd just still look at me like, I don't know.
Yeah. Again, you know, you could have the conversation if you want, if you think it would go well. When we get to Tohacha, we're going to talk about the conversations. And you have to really think how to masterfully do it in a way that it would go well.
Because, like, if I would say the wrong thing, she'd like totally...
Exactly, that's the whole point. It's very sensitive. It can make things worse, it can make things better, and you have to think how. Okay, so let's go to the tools and the toolbox. What my goal for you guys is that eventually, when we get to the end of this list, we should be able to go through in our head when we're in a situation where we're feeling internalized anger. And some people don't relate to it as anger, they relate to it as resentment, as hurt, offense. There's all kinds of words that people use when they're feeling really bad about somebody in their heart. And to, like, kind of go between all the tools until you find something that helps you resolve it. And sometimes you need 2 together. But to get to a place where I feel better about this. Okay, so Vitor, which is the resolution, the internal resolution, is very powerful. A lot of times in life you're going to have to use Vitor because it means to just not make a big deal about everything. Vitor is glue in relationships because when you really care about somebody and they're not a perfect person, you often have to be able to excuse some of their imperfections and to be able to just say, go beyond it. It's what we call, I don't know if I said this in Elo, it's like, I once heard from a certain rabbi said, every person needs a good swivel chair to decide to look away. Sometimes, I didn't see that, you didn't say that. Because good relationships, you need to sometimes swivel chair. Not everything is going to be a big deal. And we spoke about dropping the measuring stick. And if you remember, we spoke then about what dropping the measuring stick means. I'm just going to give you a quick 2-line synopsis. Means, we said that Rashi said, it's that you don't have to measure the amount of pain people are causing you. So it's either you don't have to measure, I always call her, why doesn't you call me? Or what did she mean by that comment? All that obsessive thinking, you could put down the measuring stick and say, okay, I'm more tactful than her, or I am a better caller than her, or whatever it is. Good, I'm swivel chairing, I'm walking away. When we can do this, it's very powerful, it's helpful, and most good relationships deserve for you to do it. Because people aren't perfect. They do a lot of good things for you, they make mistakes sometimes, you turn away. Sometimes this is not appropriate. And then we're going to go into Tochacha. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a whole piece that I wanted to say to you. I was once reading a book on communication in early marriage by someone called Dr. David Olson. And he had 3 basic types of communication that people have. So he spoke about aggressive communication, he spoke about passive communication, and direct communication. I think he calls it assertive, but I don't like the word assertive so much, I'm calling it direct. Okay, I'll go back to say what aggressive communication, in our jargon, would be kas, anger. And aggressive communication means that I do tell you what's on my mind. But while I'm telling you what's on my mind, I'm also going to tell you what you did last week, and that I don't like your mother, and that whatever, and I'm just going to throw it, what we call kitchen sinking. Like you just throw everything in, because it's very not controlled. I got angry. Once I'm angry, whew, everything goes in there. So in his book, he has a very cute cartoon where he has a couple, a married couple, having a conversation like this. It starts with the fact that, he didn't take out the garbage, but it gets into what happened 5 years ago and 10 years ago, and your mother, and this and that. Everything's being thrown into this conversation. And then the caption on the cartoon says something very cute. It says, this environmentally correct couple is once again recycling the garbage of their relationship. Because that's what kas is. It's recycling garbage. Let's just get it all out again and again and again. So it's being environmentally correct, recycling garbage. That's kas, that's anger. And it's often very destructive because you started out with the fact that the person didn't take out the garbage, but you get to very mean personal things because once you're on a roll, you just say anything you want to say. That's anger. Now we have something which she calls passive communication. And from the Torah perspective, we're going to call that hakpada. Because I am communicating with you, but in a very passive way. You said to me, is it okay that I did this and this? I said, sure, of course, fine, no problem. There's something weird about the way it's like a passive aggressive, like I'm not telling you what I really think. Now, the interesting insight in passive communication is very interesting. Because you think, the passive person, who's just smiling and saying everything's fine, you think you're doing the other person a favor. I didn't say a thing. I just smiled. He says that it causes the other party to feel angry, mistrustful, and confused. So here I am smiling at you and saying, of course, sure, no, don't worry, of course, you could come in the middle of the night and turn on the light, it's no problem, I really don't need so much sleep, it's fine. And you think you're being so nice, because I'm so nice. The other party is feeling angry, mistrustful, and confused. Confused because you're saying something nicely, but something in your tone is a little bit off maybe. Or maybe you're acting cool to me even though you're saying everything's fine. That's a real Jewish girl thing, everything's fine. Angry because why can't you be real with me? Meaning if you care about me, don't put on the show for me. I'm not a stranger who should put on act for. Distrustful because over time when people do not resonate what they're really feeling, there's something dishonest about them. So you kind of feel like I can't really trust what this person really thinks. And then he ends up saying that passive communication is a barrier to true intimacy. True intimacy, true closeness is that I once heard this cute thing, intimacy. It's a cute idea. You can pronounce it like this: into me, see. See into me. Meaning, if you want to be close to somebody, you want them to understand who you really are. When you're passively communicating, you're saying, I'm showing you a fake me. I don't really want to be close to you. I don't want you to see what I'm really thinking. And this is passive, but there's something really off about it. I have to tell you girls, I once had a very funny situation, because when you have this like kind of passive where you're saying something but you're not really saying what you want to say, so if the person on the other end is an insightful person, they're picking up the inconsistencies, right? There's something funny about that. You say everything's fine, but it doesn't seem like everything's fine. If the person is not particularly insightful, it might even be worse, because they walk away, they didn't get it, and they thought everything was fine, and eventually, somewhere in a relationship, it comes out that it wasn't fine. I have to tell you, between men and women, this is a problem. Men are often scared of women in terms of this, because they know that women communicate in such a funny way. I once heard like some guys talking, they're like, yeah, so like, you ask her, they're talking about like if you're, you're newly married and you're coming back from somewhere for Shabbos and it's, Saturday night, and you say to her, do you want to go out for pizza? She says, no, I don't want pizza. And then, you drive home, you drive by the pizza store and you get home, and she looks a little bit upset. And you're like, what's wrong? She says, no, nothing. What's wrong? I really know. Wasn't nothing. This is going on for 2 hours. She said, and then she's like, I really want a pizza. And then he said, yeah, but you said no. She said, yeah, because I thought that maybe you didn't really want it. If you would have asked me again, they would have known you would have wanted it, I would have said yes. Like, they go crazy from this. Like, if you want pizza, say yes. If you want pizza, say no. Like, I'm supposed to read your, and they're scared. You should know that a lot of times in dating, I have found the people who are more real communicators, there's often more chemistry. Because a guy can be going out with a girl who's great, but if he feels that he's never going to really get her or be able to take care of her needs, it's a little scary. So when people are kind of, I'm not saying that they should be assertive, but they'll tell you how they feel, they'll share emotions in a more real way. It creates like, oh, okay, I can get this person, I can understand her. So there's something about being able to be a real communicator, which is an advantage. If we go back to the third, we said that there's aggressive communication is anger, passive communication is hakpaza, and direct communication is tochacha. Tochacha means I will tell you what's on my mind, but I will do it in a way that will not be hurtful, that will be helpful to you, and it's coming from a good place. It looks very different from anger. Now I want to tell you girls, most of us are very bad at this. When I tell you, take somebody who's offending you and plan a conversation that you're going to have, where you're going to explain to them what they're doing wrong, most people will avoid it until if I tell you you have a deadline by a certain day at 12 o'clock, maybe you'll do it or maybe not. You'll tell me to the reacher. Why? Because we are wired to think that direct communication doesn't pay. That's my theory. You can tell me if you disagree with me. I think that part of the reason is because in the very early stages of life, if there was something that made you unhappy and you communicated about it, it was often in a situation where there was a hierarchy difference. Like kids who are like in first grade don't usually talk to each other about offenses, right? So it's more like a kid saying to the mother, Mommy, why do we always have to have meatballs? Or I really don't like going to Grandma's house, or whatever it was, right? And usually you're told, sit down and be quiet, right? So there's because of the hierarchy differences, and because of the fact that not all parents want to hear what kids have to say, it goes down in our young brain that when I communicate my needs, it doesn't usually pay. Now, any of you who grew up in homes where that wasn't the message you got, that's great. But many people get that message. And if it wasn't a parent, it was a teacher. And if it wasn't a teacher, it was a principal. That you wanted to say something, but you were too scared to, or if you did it, it didn't pay. So we grow up thinking, keep your problems to yourself. Don't bother. What we want to do is we want to change the way we, as individuals, and society at large, relate to direct communication. And here we're based on the pasuk in Vayikra, Yotes, pasuk Yud Zayin. The Chumash tells us, Hochech tochiach et amitecha. You surely should rebuke your brother. V'lo tisa alav chet, and you should not bear his sin. Hochech tochiach et amitecha. Oh, let's see if this one works. Thank you. Hochech tochiach et amitecha. Okay. Now, this is a mitzvah. We see, though, that it's a mitzvah that most of the time we don't keep. Why? Because if the communication is not going to be helpful, then we don't have to do this. I'm going to quote you from the Rambam. The Rambam tells us two things. He says at the end of the pasuk, which is below tisa alav chait, which means you should not bear his sin. There's different interpretations of what this means. The Rambam says that if you rebuke somebody in a way that they are embarrassed, then you are bearing a sin, meaning that the whole thing turned from a mitzvah into an avera. So many of us don't know how to do this properly, and therefore we don't do it. The Rambam, in Hilchot Deot, the Rambam says that there's a very, very big heter for not doing this mitzvah. Let me quote it to you. The Rambam in Hilchot Deot, Perek Vav, Halacha 10. Mi shechata alav chavero, lo ratzal hochicho. If somebody did something bad to you and you don't want to rebuke him, why? Mipnei shehaya hachoteh hediot biyoter. Because the sinner, the person who did the thing to you, is a very simple person. What does that mean, simple? Hediot means a simple person.
They won't understand.
He won't get it, exactly. I'm going to try to explain to them what they did wrong, and they're just not going to get it. They're going to think that was my problem. No, I didn't really do that. I didn't really. Many people are hediotot in this way. You try to communicate with them about what they did wrong, and they just don't get it. Yes?
Is it better to, if someone dispute with someone and then you realize afterwards that you did, is it better for them to rebuke you if they consider it worse about what you did, or if you have to be quiet?
Okay, no, because we're going to learn that if it's not constructive, then it shouldn't be done. The only reason for this, and this is, what's that? They don't know that you realized already. Is that what you're saying? If they don't know, then you could say to them, no, I figured this out already, I'm sorry, you don't have to have a long conversation about it, you know what I mean? Because the idea is not to make you feel guilty, the idea is to get you to a good place. Because with the other mafarshim, a lot of the other mafarshim said, lo tisa alav chait, don't carry his sin, means don't allow him to walk around with the sin. He did something really bad to you. You should rebuke him so that he won't have a sin anymore. Let him do tshuva and let him be better. Meaning you think you're doing a person a favor by not communicating with them. In the meantime, they wronged you, and they have a sin. Because you're not explaining to them what they did wrong, they will be carrying that sin around. So you, when you explain it to them, you help them. You're doing them a favor. Now again, the Gemara says that very few people can take tochacha. There's actually a very interesting conversation in the Gemara where one of the Tanaim says, he says, I don't know if anybody can take tochacha these days. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says Rabbi Akiva can take tochacha. He said, a lot of times I gave him muster and he always took it from me. So we're talking about people on a very, very, very high level, right? And yet, so really I want to say something else to you. Tochacha on its basic level, this pasuk is talking about if you saw somebody eating something not kosher, or saying lashon hara, or doing something that has nothing to do with you, you really, in theory, would go over to them, tap them on the shoulder, and say, by the way, that's not allowed what you did. We don't do this because most people don't want to hear from other people, and they'll rebel against it, and they'll get angry. But in an ideal state, and I have to quote you from the Kli Yakar. The Kli Yakar on this pasuk says something which is really a refrain for us. Ki b'zman she'ahava mitzuya b'Yisrael, kol achad b'tovato shechavero chafetz. When people really love each other, when Klal Yisrael has love between them, and it's obvious that everybody means for the other person's good, al keinu mochicho shelo yichashel ba'avera. Of course you would walk over to somebody and tap them on the shoulder and say, by the way, your skirt's too short. Because they wouldn't get angry at you. They would think that you're only telling it to their good. But I remember when I was a little girl, I was once walking Meishar, and I was a tourist in Israel, and I was walking with a few people, and one of the people I was walking with was carrying a basket. And all of a sudden, she sees that there's a piece of paper thrown into her basket. So she picks it up, and it's like it's newspaper, and it says like collarbone, skirt, elbow, whatever, and then it's circled where she was not covering.
Oh my goodness.
Now, it was so interesting to see the reaction. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, like, why are people looking at you? Why are people like, what a chutzpah. And you know what she said? She said, no, I don't take it that way. The person didn't embarrass me publicly. They didn't face me. They gave me a little note in my thing. Maybe they really cared. Maybe that's why they did it. That's how she took it. We have a certain principle, we don't get offended for people who are not offended for themselves, right? She was not offended. She said, okay, it was done in a modest way, and somebody cared enough to show me that they thought I was doing something wrong. Most of us would not react that way. The Kli Yakar is saying that if you lived in a generation where Klal Yisrael had alpha between each other, you would take rebuke as being a sign of love. Think about things that you are willing to hear from your friend. If you're about to put a piece of salad in your mouth, and your friend said, oh, there's a disgusting bug on it, you wouldn't say to her, chutzpah for telling me. You'd say, thank you for telling me. Right? So l'chora, in a bigger sense, tochacha is about thank you for helping me not do something that I didn't want to do. The problem is that we don't have enough love among us. And we think that people are doing it because they're condescending, because they're critical, because they're negative. But according to the Kli Yakar, if we really had love between us, we wouldn't take it so badly. And then he goes even further. He says, "B'zman shesonim ze lezeh." But when we live in a generation where unfortunately there's hatred among Jews, le'olam eino mochicho, you can never give tochacha. Adraba machnifo, nomar kshira asita. But rather we flatter each other and say, oh no, you're doing great. It's such a flip. When people really, really love each other, they can tell each other something. When people don't love each other, they just are yes men. Yes, yes, everything you're doing is fine. Yes, yes, yes. So our problem is that we're not living in a generation where we can give tochacha properly. But, which is why people don't walk over to each other and leave little post-it notes. By the way, so that you did that avera, maybe correct that avera, don't do that, don't do that. If we would start doing that, it would be a little intense. Where is tochacha left? Where is it possible, maybe sometimes, to do it? In the case that we're talking about. Because there's something else going on here. I'm upset at you. I'm angry at you. I don't want to hate you. I want to love you. And the reason why I'm giving you tochacha is because I want to fix our relationship. I care. Now here, even so, often we will not be able to do it because the person on the other end won't take it well. But what I want to do with you, and I'm not sure we're even going to get it all done today, is that at least we can have some tips about how to do proper tochacha in a way that if at all it's going to work here. Ravalba, who wrote Ali Shor, said something that I found was very counter. It was very hard for me to understand this, but I think I understand it. He tells people to look for an opportunity to give somebody rebuke. That sounds very, very counter. He says, why? He says, because if you can never do it, you have a handicap. Because what's going to happen when you get married and your husband really wants to make you happy, he really does, and he keeps doing certain things that offend you, but you, with your fear of open communication, keep swallowing it up. You're building up animosity. He wants to be good. You can't tell him what he's doing wrong. You have an obstacle. He says, find an opportunity, you don't have to do this 5 times a day, but every so often to try to develop the art of proper tochacha, because somewhere in your life, somebody who you care about is going to need you to do this for them. Yes?
But great people are groovy. And, I'm assuming, I don't know about, the other gender, but I'm saying, we probably do a ton of things a day that, we're probably crazy, but they never say anything.
Completely.
But, let's say, because girls have big mouths, and we would talk a lot. So, what we're, how are we going to do it? That's the problem. We're not just going to be okay, let's sit down and have a talk. And since we're not going to do it 5 times a day, we're going to be okay, so this, and this, and this, and this bother me, and you do it, and, so how do you do it?
Okay, so first of all, remember that there are 5 tools. So most of the time, you are going to have a very bogged down relationship if you have to communicate about everything. In fact, when they talk about healthy marriages, people who never have conflict, people who always have conflict is not good. And people who never have conflict, somebody's swallowing up something that they're not talking about. So we need to be able to do it sometimes. So we go through Vitor. I love him, he's great, so he came a little late, no big deal. We go through Emunah, the fact that he has this idiosyncrasy which is annoying to me. Well, Hashem chose him for me, I can deal with it. We go through Tefillah, Hashem, I don't want to be bothered by this. We do everything we do, but sometimes we're left with the tochacha. And the tochacha is if he's a constant offender about something that he's doing, and he would love to know about it to change it, but I just can't tell him. Of course, that's what's necessary here. Okay, but we have to use it very sparingly. This is not used a lot. It's used in specific situations where I'm internalizing anger about something that really he would want to know about. Okay? Yes? Yes. No, we're only on the second tool now. This topic is going to take a while because we didn't even finish tochacha. Humor is going to be number 3. And humor is also used often in marriage. You know, tochacha is only one. It has to be used very sparingly, but you have to know how to do it. Yes?
Are you suggesting that nowadays tochacha we use primarily in relationships but we're heavily invested in like a marriage or like a parent-child? So something where the relationship is very important here?
Yes, exactly. In fact, what I want to say is that the cleaner of a place you come from, meaning I'm saying this to you not because I want to one-up you, but because I really care. The cleaner of a place you come from, the cleaner results you get. So you have to really love somebody in order to give them tochacha properly. Okay, I'm going to read to you about this, but I want to first tell you a very interesting story that I had once that happened to me. When I was in high school, I went to a school which was like, my family was considered like the more religious families in that school. And I had a group of 6 friends. And my religious standards were a little bit different than theirs. And there were certain unspoken rules. They did certain things that they didn't tell me about. Like in front of me, they didn't talk about certain things that they were doing. And my part of the game, the unspoken rule, was that I was never supposed to give anybody mussar, tell anybody that they were doing anything wrong. That was kind of like the unspoken rules. So one time, one of them, we were 6 very close friends. So one time, one girl comes in, and I'm sitting there, and I guess like, you know, they usually didn't tell me a lot of things that they were doing, but she starts talking about some party that she went to the night before, what was going on at that party, whatever it is you can imagine. And I was horrified, and blurted out, kind of almost like not even processed. I said to her, do you really think that you want to be in that situation? Like you really want to be doing that? What happened was the other 4 people in the chavra jumped on me, and everyone started saying, "Who do you think you are? You're not supposed to give mussar, and what? Don't don't be our rebbetzin," and whatever it was. And all of a sudden, in the middle of all the yelling, the person who I was speaking to, the person who went to the party, she yells out. She says, "Stop!" We were all of 15. We were in 10th grade. "Stop! Everybody stop!" So everybody's like quiet for a minute, and she says, "Can't you tell that she's the only person here who really cares about me?" And all of a sudden, everybody kind of moved away, and she was crying, and I was crying. And my conclusion was not to do this every Sunday and Wednesday after this. It was not a pleasant experience. But I was coming from a clean place. Like I really cared about her, and it really bothered me, and it just came out. And she understood that. And she thought that I really cared about her. So it was an interesting message that sometimes we underestimate the person's ability to see our sincerity. And we have to ask ourselves, am I really sincere or am I not really sincere? But often when you are sincere, you'll get better results. I think if I would have planned it, I probably wouldn't have done it, because probably all kinds of ulterior motives would have come into my head. But because it came out naturally out of like pain, that's the way it was received. Now I want to read to you. This is Rav Uri Weisblum, who I quoted to you, Elul, who's a mashgiach in Haifa. So he says, we have to change the way we view tochacha, the way we view rebuke. He says, tochacha, lashon tochacha, b'chol makom, birur dvarim. Tochacha means clarification of facts. Einena tkira, this is Rav Uri Weisblum. Einena tkira, einena pkia. It's not about jabbing the other person, it's not about stabbing them, it's not about pinching them. It's about a clarification of facts. He says, Tochacha luchacha liot novat mi'ahava amitit shel hamochiach. It can only come from true love on the part of the giver. And listen to this litmus test. Ulatzmiach belibo shel hashomea ahava amuka k'lapei hamochiach. And its result is that the receiver should feel love to the giver. Meaning, thank you. Thank you for caring enough. Thank you for caring enough about this relationship to share with me what you really think. And that is the litmus test here. Now this is a very hard darga, and this is why we don't do it all the time. But I have to be coming from a place where I really care, and the other person has to receive it as thank you, I see that you really care. Yes?
Do you think that the lack of doing it often makes it hard to understand? Like, if you do something on a regular basis, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm saying since we don't do it on a regular basis, if you were to do something on a regular basis, if you would have better comprehension of it because it's like recurring daily. So since we do it once in a while, we don't have that same understanding of it. I'm not saying it should be done every day, but I think that's part of it.
It's a kind of, you know what, I was trying to think about exactly this thing, because Rav was telling you practice it, but we don't want to bog down our relationships. So I was kind of thinking maybe you should practice it in your head. If I could say what I would want to say to this person, what would I say? And you kind of play it out that way. How would they respond? How would I want them to respond? We're going to go through, unfortunately I'm going to have to end for today, but next week, next week I'm in America, the week after, we're going to go through a list of probably around 20 tools about how to do this properly. Even little things like the choice of words that you use, what your opening sentence when you have the conversation. You want to do a masterful job at getting the other person to feel good about the conversation, not bad. And that's a big job because we are wired to be defensive. We're wired to say, uh-oh, why am I being, mustard right now? And we want to get good at doing this in a way that the other person feels good about the conversation. That's tohacha. And that's why it's often not done. By the way, I forgot, I'm sorry, the Rambam, I said to you hediot, the person's simple. The Rambam says something else. If the person was confused, it's also not a good time to talk to them. Don't talk to them when they're a little out of control, very sad, very anxious, very something. It's not going to go over well. So the Rambam says that there's many heterim for not doing this. If the person isn't going to receive it well, don't do it. If the person is too simple to understand, don't do it. If the person is so overwhelmed emotions they can't take it, don't do it. Many times. But we have to be able to still practice the art of doing